seems to me that religion caters for. We're offered in religion the chance to have our sins not just forgiven, but taken away from us altogether. We're offered the chance to throw them on somebody else. We're offered what I consider to be the horrible and rather immoral doctrine of vicarious redemption, whereby it's as if you never sinned in the first place. It's not like having your debts paid. It's not like having wasted time made up for you. It's as if you've been cleansed, as if you never did it. This is an absurd abandonment of responsibility, and it takes the form, an unpleasant form, well known to the peasants of antiquity, of scapegoating. You simply throw it all onto another party and make that party, sometimes an animal, sometimes a human sacrifice, bear these sins away. Out of this kind of ritual and out of this kind of negation of responsibility, it seems to me, we have to grow. So that's the first point. It denies us our moral autonomy. It is said that we need God for morality, or perhaps I shouldn't caricature my opponent's position. It is said that without some appeal to the divine, to religion, we would not ourselves be able to tell a right action. We wouldn't know how to ground ourselves ethically. We wouldn't know right from wrong. We wouldn't know precisely how to make the distinctions. I believe the contrary is the case. I believe that my mother's ancestors, if they ever did really spend all that time getting to Mount Sinai, which I think is, by the way, a mythical story, but never mind, let's take it as true for now, would not have got there and would not have got that far if they'd been under the pre-existing impression that adultery, perjury, murder, and theft were all fine. It's rather from religion, from human solidarity, from the knowledge that all societies have, that they cannot possibly evolve if they countenance murder or perjury or theft. That religion takes its morality. The stuff that's in the Ten Commandments, Dinesh, that isn't to do with human morality, is often highly immoral. For example, it's forbidden even to covet other people's goods or achievements. And by the way, among their goods are included their wives, their womenfolk, who are lumped in with chattel, which goes to show that these commandments are created by men and not by gods. They're created by the agricultural and masculine values of the time. It's not a small point. But there's nothing, for example, to condemn the abuse of children. There's only a vague demand that parents be respected. After all, this is coming from, apparently, a father. There's nothing against racism. There's nothing against slavery. There's nothing against genocide. Partly because in these and ensuing chapters, all those things, racism, genocide, slavery, are actually going to be not just recommended, but enjoined, made an actual injunction on the children of Israel. They're going to be told to do these things. So it seems to me very obvious that what is known as religious morality is partly man-made, and it shows. It shows that it's made by a greedy and cruel, partly evolved, fairly highly evolved, let's not run ourselves down too much, primate species that turns out on examination to be, as we now know, 1/2 chromosome away from a chimpanzee. Well, the other objection, and it comes out of this one, is that religion gives us a false picture of moral reality. If it were true that religion was the source of morals and ethics, then you'd have to be able to answer the following two questions that I'm going to pose to you, and take your time to answer them, and we have plenty of time to discuss this when we move to the public phase of this evening. You have to name for me a moral action committed or an ethical statement made by a believing person, by a person of faith, that I couldn't make as an unbeliever. Okay? I've challenged the Archbishop of Canterbury on this in public, and many other spokesmen of many religions, and I've not yet had a persuasive answer. You have time. Think of something I can't do that's moral, or I can't say that's moral or ethical, because I'm not a believer. Take your time. Now there's a corollary question. Think of a wicked thing done, or an evil thing said by somebody purely because they are a person of faith. You've already thought of one. You don't need any prompting from me. The suicide murder community is almost entirely faith-based. The genital mutilation of children is exclusively religiously motivated. Sins that hadn't been thought of before, things that we've hardly had time to think of condemning, are actually advocated by men of God, and often in the name of God, as a matter of obedience to his will. So just bear in mind, ladies and gentlemen, if you do want things to get a little warm later on, that I, for one, will take it as extremely insulting if any person of faith makes the assumption that their faith gives them a moral edge on me. I want to hear a lot more apologizing from the faith-based communities for the evil that they've done before they even start clearing their throats and telling me I wouldn't know right from wrong without their permission. I'm sorry, I won't be, can't be spoken to in that tone of voice, and nor should any of you. On with the false picture of reality. Religion has its grandeur. The reason why this discussion is always so interesting, always so worth having. The magnificence of religion comes from the fact that it was first. It was our first attempt. It's our first attempt to make sense of the cosmos, our first cosmology, our first attempt at philosophy. In many ways, and in some of the books, our first attempt at literature and poetry. In some ways, our first attempt at medicine, even at physics, at all the sciences and some of the arts. This was humanity's first fumbling attempt to look at the sky and see where it fitted in. All credit to religion for trying this. Someone had to. But because it was the first, it is also in many ways the worst. What happens when you don't have a germ theory of disease and you wonder where the plagues are coming from? Well, you either think they're a punishment from God, or you think, depending on how far we've gone along into the medieval years of religion, they come from the Jews poisoning the wells, or from witchcraft, or from people not going to their prayers enough. The same about natural phenomena like earthquakes or floods. There must be a supernatural explanation for things that, of course, we now know can be much better and more accurately explained for us. So the fact that we are still burdened by the false picture given of reality and of nature by religion is, I think, not the smallest of the indictments against it. You still hear, at times like Katrina or the Pacific tsunami, you will still hear men of religion, including in civilized and advanced and educated countries such as England, the bishops saying, this is because of sin that there is an inundation. And out of this, it seems to me again, we must teach ourselves as developed humans, evolving humans, to grow. There are essentially two choices once we've got past the fearful childhood of our species and the terror with which we had to face reality in those days. We can either say of ourselves and to ourselves that we are here because of a divine design, or we can admit that we are here because of processes we don't fully understand, but that are cosmological in the first instance, the Big Bang, and Darwinian, to give it a shorthand, the consequence of evolution by natural selection and random mutation in the second. Now, it's an interesting thing that religion now wants, having fought very strongly against cosmology, having fought against any discovery that threatened the idea of a man and God-centered Earth that was itself the center of the solar system, that was itself the center of the universe, and having fought very hard and still fighting against the idea of evolution by natural selection. The great thing about being religious is this: when the evidence against you becomes overwhelming, and you can see the amazing intricacies of the Big Bang and the extraordinary matter of the Hubble red light shift and the things we can now see through Mr. Hubble's telescope, and when you see the extraordinary variety of species, religion says, come to think of it, that is true. In fact, it shows that God was even more ingenious than we had thought him in the first place. What's my objection to this kind of argument? Well, of the many I could make, the first is simply this: it's completely impossible to refute. Because every time any new evidence comes to light, it's claimed for, well, it fits with the unoverthrowable theory that we already had. Some of you will have been taught already, I hope, that a theory that can be described as unfalsifiable is to that extent a very weak theory. And that seems to me to apply with overwhelming force to the religious or godly explanation